I used to think small towns were safe because they were simple. Fewer streets to get lost in, fewer strangers to worry about, fewer shadows. That was my mistake, believing safety was something you could measure by population. My town sat in a bowl of evergreens and old rock, a place with one main road and a pride that tasted like dust. The kind of place where the diner waitress knows your order before you sit down, and the hardware store sells more rope than paint. The kind of place where the radio station reads birthdays like scripture, where everyone tells you with a smile that never quite reaches their eyes that nothing bad happens here. Nothing bad happened here, they said, because nothing bad was allowed to be real. I don't know when the disappearances began. In my memory, they've always been part of the background, like the town's church bell or the train that never stopped. Maybe it started with a dog that didn't come home. Maybe it started with the kid who climbed the water tower and never climbed down. Maybe it started earlier, with someone no one talked about so thoroughly that their name evaporated. In town, time had a way of looping back on itself, and the past was whatever the present decided it should have been. But I remember the first time I noticed the pattern. I was 16, riding my bike home after dark because I'd stayed too long at my friend's house, pretending we were in a world where night meant stars instead of rules. On the edge of town, there was a house with a porch light that was always on. It was a comfort, like a lighthouse. That night, the light was off. I slowed down. The air felt thick, like the space before a thunderstorm. I looked at the porch. I looked at the window. I waited for movement. Nothing. The next day, the porch light was back on, bright as ever. The mailbox had a fresh coat of paint. The lawn was trimmed. The house looked reset, like it had been scrubbed clean overnight. Did the Harlows move? I asked my mom at breakfast. She didn't even look up from her coffee. What Harlows? The Harlows. The house near the old quarry, with the porch light. My mom stirred her coffee until it went pale. You must be thinking of somewhere else. She smiled the way adults smile when they want you to stop asking. There's no house near the quarry. Not anymore. It burned down years ago. I knew that was a lie because I'd passed it 1,000 times. That was the first lesson. If the town decided something wasn't true, it wasn't. Years later, when I finally got old enough to leave, I packed my car like I was fleeing a storm. Clothes, books, a shoebox of photographs, the kind of sentimental clutter you swear you'll keep even though you won't. I left a note on the counter for my mom because in a town like that, even departure feels like betrayal. I was 22, convinced that adulthood came with exits. The sun was barely up when I crossed the town line. There was a sign, weathered wood with peeling paint. Welcome to Marrow Falls. Beneath it, in smaller letters, a slogan the town council must have thought was charming. Stay a while. As I drove past, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The sign looked closer than it should have. I drove for 40 minutes. The road was straight. The trees were thick on both sides, trunks like bars. I passed the same bent speed limit sign twice. I passed the same dead deer with its legs stiff in the ditch twice. I told myself I was tired, that my brain was stitching the scenery together wrong. Then I saw the welcome sign again. Welcome to Marrow Falls. Stay a while. My hands tightened on the wheel until my knuckles ached. I pulled over so hard gravel sprayed the undercarriage. I got out, heart hammering, and stared at the sign like it might blink. Behind it, the forest breathed. The road was empty in both directions, no crossroads, no turnoff. Just the same ribbon of asphalt disappearing into trees. I got back in the car and drove the other way, the way I'd come. 10 minutes, 20, 30, the same dead deer, the same bent sign. And then, like a punchline delivered by something that didn't know humor, the welcome sign again. I laughed once, sharp and ugly, the sound of someone watching their sanity slip on ice. Okay, I told the empty car. Fine. I turned around and drove back into town. At the gas station, old men drank coffee like it was medicine. They looked up as I pulled in, and their eyes followed me with the slow, patient curiosity of animals that know you can't get away. Inside, the clerk, a woman with a name tag that said Lorraine in faded red letters, rang up my energy drink without asking. She slid it across the counter. Her nails were bitten to the quick. Roads closed? I tried to sound casual. Lorraine's smile twitched. Roads open. I drove out. It looped. I ended up back at the sign. I waited for her to laugh, to tell me I'd missed a turn. She didn't laugh. She didn't look surprised. She looked tired. You must have gotten turned around, she said. Her voice was flat, like she was reading it off a script. In a straight line? Lorraine's eyes flicked to the security camera in the corner. Then to the window. Then, like she was afraid of her own mouth, she lowered her voice. Don't drive out at night. It's morning, I said, and she swallowed. Then don't stay out until it's night. Her fingers tapped the counter in a nervous rhythm. You leaving? I'm trying to. Try harder, she whispered, and then louder, as if someone had pressed play. Have a good day. I drove to the diner, because in Merrow Falls, the diner was where news went to die. The smell of grease and coffee hit me like an old blanket. The booths were filled with the same faces I'd grown up with, the same voices. The jukebox played an old song that always seemed to be on, like it couldn't remember anything else. Mabel, the waitress, slid into my booth without asking. Haven't seen you in a bit, she said. You been out of town? No, I said, and that's the problem. She laughed politely, a sound with no teeth. What can I get you? I tried to leave this morning. The road loops. Mabel's pen paused over her notepad, just for a second. Then she wrote something anyway, even though I hadn't ordered. Eggs? Mabel, the road loops. Sunny side up, she decided. Toast, too. My stomach clenched. Why is everyone acting like this? Her eyes stayed on the paper. Because it's easier. She tore the ticket off the pad and tucked it in her apron. And because asking questions makes you interesting. Interesting? She finally looked at me. In her eyes was a warning so clear it might have been a sign. The kind of interesting that gets you noticed. My food arrived. Eggs, toast, and a silence heavy enough to bruise. I stared at the yolks until they looked like small suns drowning in white. I should have left it there. I should have swallowed my fear and pretended the loop was a fluke. That's what the town wanted, for you to choose the story that hurt less. But I'd spent my whole life being told what was real. I wasn't ready to do it anymore. So I did the thing you're never supposed to do in Merrow Falls. I went looking. The disappearances weren't a mystery because there were no clues. They weren't a mystery because there were no questions. Every absence was handled, like a missing chair in a room everyone agreed was supposed to be empty. Someone would simply stop showing up. Their house would be sold within a week, or repainted, or if it was easier, it would have burned down years ago. Their name would fade from conversations as if it had been rubbed out with an eraser. I started with the public records at the town hall. The building smelled like mildew and old paper. The receptionist, a man with a cheerful tie and a smile like tape over a crack, asked what I needed. Property transfers, I said. And for what purpose? Curiosity, I smiled back. He hesitated, and for a moment, the air felt like it did by the quarry, thick with storm. Then he nodded. Of course. The records room was lined with filing cabinets, drawers labeled by street names. I opened one at random. Inside were folders, neat and thin. I pulled one out. The first page was a deed transfer. It listed the seller, the buyer, and the date. The seller's name was blank. Not blacked out, not torn off, just empty, as if whoever typed it couldn't remember the letters. I flipped through more. Names missing. Dates missing. Whole sections of forms left untouched, like someone had started to fill them out and then forgotten why. At the bottom of each file, in a corner no one would notice unless they were looking, was the same stamp. Merrow Falls Administration. Verified. Verified by who, I wondered. Verified against what? When I left town hall, the receptionist asked, "Find what you needed?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to say yes. Instead, I said, "Who verifies the records?" His smile didn't change, but his eyes did. They sharpened. "The town does," he said, as if that answered everything. On my way home, I passed the library. It was small, brick, with a bell over the door. I went in. The librarian, Mrs. Eddens, looked up from her desk. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I need old newspapers," I said. "For a school project?" She sounded hopeful. like she wanted it to be something harmless. For myself. I kept my voice even. Her hands tightened around her pencil. We don't keep everything. Try me. She led me to a back room where the air was colder, as if the past needed refrigeration. There were boxes of bound newspapers, their pages yellowed. I picked a year and started flipping. There were stories about bake sales. There were stories about high school football. There were stories about the annual Harvest Festival, always described with the same words, as if someone had copy-pasted joy. And then there were gaps. A week missing in March, 2 days missing in June, an entire month missing in October. Where are the rest? I asked. Mrs. Edens licked her lips. They were damaged. Water. She glanced at the ceiling, as if expecting rain indoors. All the same weeks? She didn't answer. I went to a shelf of local history books, the kind with glossy covers and smiling families on the front. I opened one and scanned the pages. It listed the founding of Merrow Falls. It listed the first church, the first school, the first mayor. It did not list the quarry. It did not list the old mine. It did not list the stretch of forest at the edge of town that everyone avoided, where the trees grew too close together like they were conspiring. In the margins of the book, someone had written in pencil, "We used to have more." I traced the words with my finger. The graphite smeared slightly, like the message was trying to move. That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by boxes I hadn't unpacked because I'd been so sure I'd be gone. The moonlight through the blinds made bars on the carpet. I thought about Lorraine's warning. Don't drive out at night. I heard a car pass on the road outside, then another, then silence. At midnight, the town went still in a way that felt unnatural, as if someone had turned down the volume on reality. I tried to sleep. I failed. Around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps on the sidewalk. Slow, measured, like someone walking with purpose. I crept to the window and pushed the blinds apart. A man walked down the street. I didn't recognize him. That was strange in itself. In Merrow Falls, you recognized everyone, even if you didn't know their name. He wore a jacket too thin for the cold. His hands were in his pockets. He walked as if he was following a line only he could see. Behind him at a distance, another figure moved. Smaller, a woman maybe. She kept to the shadows. And behind her, this is the part my brain tried to throw away, there was something else. Not a person, not an animal. A shape that didn't hold its edges right. It moved like smoke pretending to be solid. It slid rather than stepped. The man reached the corner where the street bent toward the forest road. He hesitated. The woman behind him stopped. The shape behind her paused too, swelling slightly, as if it was breathing. Then the man turned the corner and vanished. Not walked out of sight, vanished. The woman followed, and she vanished too. The shape drifted after them, and when it reached the corner, the streetlight above it flickered. For a moment, the bulb went out. When it came back on, the shape was gone. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might wake my mother. I stumbled back from the window, pressing a hand over my mouth. In the morning, I found the streetlight intact. No scorch marks, no broken glass. The sidewalk clean. I asked my mom if she'd heard anything last night. Heard what? She said, buttering toast. Footsteps, cars, anything. She shook her head. You have nightmares when you get stressed. She set the knife down carefully. Maybe you should stop stirring things up. I stared at her. Do you know? She didn't look at me. Know what? People disappear. The road loops. Something is... I stopped because the words sounded insane in daylight. My mom's jaw tightened. She took a slow breath. Everyone gets through it, she said. Through what? Being young, wanting to run. She forced a smile. You get older, you settle. You stop noticing the missing pieces. She took a bite of toast, as if the conversation was over. I realized then that the town didn't just erase people. It trained you to erase yourself. That afternoon, I called my friend Jonah, the only person I trusted to tell me the truth. We'd grown up together, survived the same hallways, the same Friday nights. He answered on the third ring. Hey, he said, long time. Jonah, I need you to be honest, I said. He exhaled slowly. That's a dangerous sentence. Have you ever tried to leave? Silence. Then softly, everyone tries. And? And you end up back here. His voice sounded like he was far away, even though I knew he was probably in his kitchen, staring at his own walls. Why doesn't anyone talk about it? Jonah laughed, but it wasn't humor. Because talking about it makes it stronger. What does? I demanded. He lowered his voice. The town. The thing. Whatever you want to call it. He paused. My dad used to say Marrow Falls is a mouth. People wander too close, and it closes. Another pause. He said it needs feeding. My skin prickled. Feeding with what? Jonah didn't answer right away. With people who don't fit, he said finally. People who push. People who keep looking at the seams. His voice sharpened. So, stop pushing. No. The word came out before I could stop it. Jonah sighed. Then don't do it alone. He hesitated. Meet me tonight, after dark, by the old bridge. He hung up before I could ask more. The old bridge was outside town, a rusted span over a creek that barely deserved the name. Kids used to dare each other to walk across it at night. No one did anymore. I drove there just before midnight, headlights cutting through fog that hadn't been there earlier. The woods pressed in close. My radio hissed with static, like the town didn't want other voices in the air. Jonah was already there, leaning against his truck. His face was pale in the headlights. You really came, he said. You said you had answers. I stepped out, pulling my jacket tighter. He nodded toward the creek. Listen. At first I heard only water, faint. Then, beneath it, a sound like whispering. Not words. More like breath moving through teeth. Do you hear that all the time, I asked? Jonah's eyes stayed on the dark under the bridge. Only when it wants you to. What is it? He shook his head. Nobody knows, or nobody remembers. He rubbed his hands together like he could warm up fear. But I know this. It hates witnesses. It hates people who keep track. He pulled something from his pocket, a folded map, old paper soft at the creases. My grandfather made this, he said, back when the town still admitted roads existed. He opened it on the hood of his truck. The map showed Marrow Falls, the main road, the side streets. But beyond the town line, where my current maps showed blank forest, this map had routes, trails, an old service road leading to a highway. That's the way out, Jonah said, tapping the paper. Not the main road. The main road is a loop. It's a trick. My pulse jumped. So we can leave? Maybe. Jonah's mouth tightened. The service road is different. It's older, less watched. He met my eyes. But you have to go at a certain time. When it's distracted. Distracted by what? I asked, though I already felt the answer. Jonah looked away. By feeding. And the whispering under the bridge seemed to grow louder, as if the creek was leaning in. People disappear at night, I said, my voice barely a breath. That's it. That's the feeding. Jonah nodded once. And everyone pretends it doesn't happen because the alternative is admitting we're living inside a trap. He swallowed. My cousin tried to leave last year. He got to the sign and thought he was free. By morning, his room was empty. His photos were gone. My aunt swore she never had a son. His eyes glistened, but he didn't let the tears fall. I felt something in me fracture. So how do we do this? Jonah folded the map carefully. Tomorrow night, the Harvest Festival. He said it like a curse. That's in 2 days, I said. No, Jonah replied, and his voice held that flat town script tone for a second. It's tomorrow. He frowned, as if even he couldn't keep time straight. I checked my phone. The date was wrong. It said it was Thursday, even though I knew it had been Wednesday. My calendar was shifted, events missing. The town was editing my life. It takes time too, Jonah said quietly. It takes whatever makes you certain. And the next day, the whole town moved like it was rehearsed. Banners hung across Main Street. The smell of fried dough drifted through the air. People smiled too brightly. Kids ran in circles, shrieking with laughter that sounded practiced. I watched from the sidewalk, feeling like an outsider in my own memory. Jonah found me near the pumpkin display. You ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. I tried to sound brave. It came out thin. We go after the bonfire starts, he said. When everyone's looking at the flames, when it can taste all that noise? He lowered his voice. Don't tell anyone. Not even your mom. The town hears through people. I thought about my mother buttering toast, her eyes refusing mine. I wondered what part of her was still her, and what part belonged to Marrow Falls. That night, the bonfire was lit in the field behind the school. Flames roared up, eating the dark. People gathered around, faces orange, eyes shining. Someone played a fiddle. Someone clapped. The town wore happiness like a mask. Jonah and I slipped away through the crowd, moving behind the concession stands, past the porta potties, toward the edge of the field where the grass met trees. As soon as we stepped into the woods, the air changed, cooler, thicker. The laughter behind us dulled, like we were closing a door. Jonah led the way with a flashlight, keeping it low. Service roads this way, he whispered. The forest was wrong. Trees leaned inward, branches tangled overhead like knotted fingers. The ground was uneven, roots rising like bones. We reached a break in the trees where an old gravel track began, the service road. It looked forgotten, weeds pushing through stones, tire ruts filled with stagnant water. Jonah's breath fogged. This is it, he said. We got into our cars, me and mine, Jonah in his truck, and started down the track, slow, headlights slicing the woods. At first, it felt normal. The road didn't loop. The trees passed by without repeating. I felt hope rise in my chest like a balloon. Then the radio in my car turned on by itself. Static. Then a voice. Not music, not a DJ. A voice that sounded like my own but older, cracked. Turn around, it said. I slapped the radio off. It clicked back on. Turn around, the voice repeated, and beneath it I heard whispering, like the creak under the bridge. I glanced in my rearview mirror. For a moment, the darkness behind us looked deeper than it should, like the forest was opening its mouth. Jonah's truck ahead slowed. He flashed his brake lights twice, a signal. I leaned out my window and called, "What is it?" Jonah shouted back, "Keep going! Don't listen!" The road dipped into a hollow. Fog pooled there, thick as milk. My headlights became useless, beams swallowed. I could barely see Jonah's taillights. Then I saw movement in the fog, shapes at the edge of the road, figures standing too still. As I drove closer, the fog thinned enough for me to see their faces. They were people I knew. My high school principal, dead 5 years. The boy who'd climbed the water tower. The woman who used to run the florist's shop. The man I'd seen vanish around the corner. They stood in the fog with blank eyes, mouths slightly open, as if they were waiting for instructions. One of them lifted a hand, palm out. My mother's face. My foot hit the brake without permission. The car jerked, tires skidding on wet gravel. My heart lurched. The figure, my mother, stepped closer. Her eyes were wrong, too reflective, like a deer's. "Come back," she said, and her voice was hers, exactly hers. "You're tired. You got turned around." Behind her, the others began to whisper, a chorus of breath and teeth. Jonah's truck lurched forward, punching through the fog. His horn blared, loud and angry. The figures didn't move out of the way. The truck passed through them, not around. Through. They scattered like smoke, tearing apart and reforming behind him. Jonah leaned out his window and screamed, "Don't stop!" I slammed the gas, forcing my car forward. The figure of my mother blurred past my window, her hand reaching, her fingers too long. The fog lifted suddenly as if we'd broken a surface. Ahead, the gravel road met pavement, a highway. I could see reflective signs, the faint glow of distant streetlights. Freedom in the shape of infrastructure. Jonah slowed at the edge of the highway, his truck half on gravel, half on asphalt. I pulled up beside him, shaking. "We did it," I whispered, not trusting my voice. Jonah didn't look relieved. He looked terrified. "Not yet," he said. He pointed at the highway sign. The sign read, "Route 13, Marrow Falls 1 mile." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible," I said. Jonah's face was wet with sweat despite the cold. "It follows," he said, and it always follows. He swallowed hard. "We need to get far enough that it can't rewrite the map." We pulled onto the highway and drove, fast. The tires hummed on asphalt. The world felt wider. My chest hurt with the effort of hope. 5 miles, 10, 20. The sign appeared again. Route 13, Marrow Falls 1 mile. My hands trembled on the wheel. No, I said, like the word could be a wall. Jonah's truck swerved slightly as if he'd flinched. The sign appeared again, and again. Each time, the distance stayed the same. 1 mile. Always 1 mile. My GPS screen flickered. The map collapsed into static. The voice from the radio returned, softer now, almost kind. Stay a while, it whispered. I tasted bile. What do we do? I shouted into the empty car. My phone buzzed. A text from my mom. Where are you? Dinner's getting cold. The timestamp was wrong. It said the message was sent yesterday. I looked up and saw Jonah's truck braking hard. I slammed my brakes too. We skidded onto the shoulder. Ahead, the highway was gone. Not blocked, not detoured. Gone. The asphalt ended in a sheer drop into darkness, like the road had been cut off and the rest of the world had been erased. Jonah got out, stumbling. I followed, legs weak. We stood at the edge of the nothing and stared. It wasn't a cliff. There was no rock, no earth, just a void, swallowing our headlights. Behind us, the forest on either side of the road rustled, though there was no wind. The whispering grew, surrounding us. Jonah's voice shook. It doesn't let you see what's outside, he said. Because if you saw it, you'd know how small it is, how hungry. He turned to me, eyes wide. We have to trick it. How? He laughed once, bitter. By giving it a story it likes. He grabbed a rock from the shoulder and hurled it into the void. We listened. No sound of impact. It's not the world out there, Jonah whispered. It's just absence. It makes the town feel like all there is. I backed away from the edge, breathing fast. So we're trapped forever? Jonah's shoulders slumped. Not forever. He looked toward the forest, and his expression hardened, like he'd made a decision. It lets some people go, sometimes, if it thinks it doesn't need them anymore. Or if it has someone else, I said, and the words tasted like ash. Jonah didn't deny it. The whispering shifted, becoming almost like laughter. Lights appeared behind us on the highway, headlights approaching. A car coming from the direction we had driven. The impossible direction. It pulled up and stopped. The driver rolled down the window. Lorraine from the gas station. Her face was drawn, eyes rimmed red, like she hadn't slept in years. Get in, she said. How are you here? I demanded. Lorraine's mouth trembled. Because it wants you back. And because I want to help. She glanced past me toward the trees. But we don't have time for questions. Jonah stepped closer to her car. You know the way? Lorraine nodded, swallowing hard. There's one more road. It doesn't like it. It's old. It hurts it. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. But you have to go through the quarry. My stomach clenched. My mom said there's no quarry. Lorraine's laugh was broken. That's because the town lies better than people. She looked at me. Do you want out? I did. God, I did. We followed Lorraine off the highway, onto a dirt path that shouldn't have existed. The forest here was thinner, the trees older, bark scarred like they'd been clawed. The air smelled of wet stone. The path led to a chain-link fence, rusted and sagging. A sign hung crooked. No trespassing. Marrow Falls. Municipal property. Lorraine cut her headlights. We go on foot, she whispered. We climbed through a gap in the fence. The ground beyond was littered with broken glass and old beer cans, relics of teenage daring. The quarry yawned ahead, a wide pit of dark water ringed by rock walls. In the center of the water, something pale floated, a shape like bone. Don't look too long, Lorraine warned, but my eyes locked anyway. The pale shape rose slowly, as if pulled upward by invisible strings. It wasn't a log. It wasn't debris. It was an arm, then a shoulder, then a head. A person emerged from the water, skin waxy, eyes closed. They stood on the surface as if it were solid, dripping black water that didn't splash. More shapes rose behind them, a line of people climbing out of the quarry like the water was giving birth. Jonah backed away, whispering, "No, no." Lorraine's voice shook. This is where it keeps them, the ones it hasn't finished with. She pointed to a narrow path along the rock wall. The road's there. Keep moving. Don't stop. Don't let them touch you. The figures from the water opened their eyes. Their eyes were reflective, like my mother's in the fog. They began to walk toward us, feet silent on stone. We ran. The path along the quarry wall was narrow, loose gravel sliding under our shoes. The water below was black and still, except for the ripples of bodies climbing out. I heard whispering all around us now, not just breath through teeth, but fragments of words, names, memories, things I'd forgotten. "Remember the porch light," a voice murmured. "Remember the school play," another said. "Remember how safe it felt," another whispered, and I realized the town was using nostalgia like a hook. The path opened into a tunnel carved into rock, half collapsed. The entrance was framed by rotting beams, an old mine hidden in the history books. Lorraine ducked inside. Jonah and I followed, our flashlights slicing through dust. The tunnel smelled of damp and iron. Water dripped from the ceiling. Our footsteps echoed, loud in the confined space. Behind us, the whispering grew louder, then footsteps, not ours. The figures from the quarry were following. Their footsteps made no sound, but the air changed as they approached, colder, heavier. We pushed deeper into the tunnel, following Lorraine's light. The walls narrowed, the ceiling lowered. My breath came in panicked gasps. "How far?" Jonah rasped. "Almost," Lorraine said, though she sounded unsure. The tunnel forked. Lorraine hesitated. For the first time, fear flashed across her face like lightning. "You don't know," I said. "I did," she whispered. "I did, but it keeps changing." She pressed her palm to the wall, as if she could feel the rock's memory. Left. No. Right. The whispering behind us surged, and in it I heard my own voice again, older, cracked. "Turn around," it said. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cover my ears. But there was nowhere to put the sound. Lorraine chose left. We ran down the left tunnel, and it opened into a chamber where the ceiling rose high, disappearing into darkness. Old mining equipment rusted in piles. A ladder climbed up to a square of faint light. "Up!" Lorraine shouted. Jonah grabbed the ladder first, climbing fast. I followed, hands slippery on metal. As I climbed, I felt something brush my ankle. A hand, cold, wet. I kicked instinctively, and my foot hit nothing solid, just resistance like pushing through thick smoke. The whispering turned into a hiss. Jonah reached the top and shoved open a hatch. Cold night air poured in. He hauled himself out. Lorraine climbed after me, fast, silent. I was halfway up when the ladder shuddered. Below, in the chamber, the figures from the quarry stood in a circle, looking up. Their eyes reflected my flashlight beam dozens of small moons. One of them lifted its face. It was Jonah's cousin. "Come back," it said, and the voice was a perfect copy of Jonah's. Jonah froze at the top, hearing his own voice from below. For a second, his hands tightened on the hatch edge like he might obey. "Jonah!" I shouted. He blinked hard, like waking from a spell. "Move!" he yelled. I climbed faster, lungs burning. Lorraine reached down and grabbed my wrist, pulling. As my head rose above the hatch, something grabbed my leg again, stronger this time. Cold fingers sank into my calf like hooks. I screamed, a raw sound. Lorraine pulled harder. Jonah grabbed my other arm. For a moment, I was suspended between worlds, the tunnel below with its whispering dead, and the surface above with its sharp night air. Then the grip on my leg loosened, not because it let go, but because something else took hold. The hatch slammed shut. Jonah did it, panic in his eyes. The metal clanged, echoing. My leg was free, but Lorraine was not. Her hands were still through the hatch, fingers clawing at the edge. Her face was half visible in the gap, eyes wide. "No!" she screamed. Jonah hesitated, horror on his face. Lorraine looked at me, and for a second, her expression softened. Acceptance. Like she'd known this was the price. "Run," she mouthed. Then her face was yanked down into darkness. The hatch bulged once, as if something pressed from below. Then it went still. The night around us was quiet. Too quiet. We stood in a clearing on the far side of the quarry. Somewhere I'd never been even though I'd lived here my whole life. The sky was starless, clouds swallowing light. The trees were thin, and beyond them I could see, impossibly, a line of city lights in the distance. Real lights. Not the sickly orange glow of Marrow Falls street lamps. Jonah stared at them like a starving man seeing food. "That's That's outside, he whispered. My throat ached. Lorraine. Jonah swallowed hard, jaw trembling. She knew, he said. She knew what would happen. He looked at me. We can't waste it. We ran through the trees toward the lights. As we ran, I felt the air change again. Less thick, less controlled. The whispering faded to a distant murmur. The trees thinned. The ground leveled into a paved side road. A street sign stood at the corner. It read, County Line Road. No mention of Marrow Falls. I laughed, breathless, half sobbing. We did it, I said. Jonah didn't laugh. He was staring back into the trees. It's still there, he whispered. I followed his gaze. Between the trunks, in the darkness, the forest looked deeper, like a hole in the world. And in that hole, something moved. Not the quarry figures, not a person. The shape I'd seen on the street, smoke pretending to be solid. It hovered at the edge of the trees, watching. For a moment, it seemed to swell, as if it was inhaling. Then slowly it withdrew, melting back into darkness. The whispering stopped. I stood on County Line Road and waited for the world to snap back, for the sign to change, for the loop to pull us home. It didn't. Jonah exhaled shakily. Maybe it can't cross, he said. Maybe, I replied, though I didn't believe in maybes anymore. We walked down the road toward the distant lights, exhausted. My calf throbbed where the cold fingers had gripped. Jonah's hands shook. As the lights grew closer, I realized something else. The farther we got from the woods, the harder it was to remember Marrow Falls. At first, it was small things. The name of my third-grade teacher, the color of my mom's kitchen curtains. Then bigger. The layout of Main Street, the sound of the diner jukebox. I stopped walking. Jonah, I said. He turned frowning. What? What's the slogan on the sign? I asked. He blinked. The welcome sign? Yeah, what does it say? Jonah opened his mouth, then closed it. His brow furrowed, frustration rising. It says, he rubbed his temple. It says, stay a while, I whispered. Jonah's eyes widened. How do you know? Because it was in my bones, I thought. Because the town had carved it there. I realized then that leaving wasn't just physical. Marrow Falls didn't only trap bodies. It trapped stories. It made you forget so completely that even if you escaped, you couldn't warn anyone. You couldn't map the way back. You couldn't even prove it was real. And if you couldn't remember, then it could keep feeding, unseen. I reached into my pocket and felt paper, Jonah's map. I'd taken it when we ran without thinking. I pulled it out under a streetlight as we approached the first houses of the neighboring town. The map was blank, not torn, not burned, blank. The ink was gone as if it had never been there. My hands shook. No, I whispered. Jonah stared at it, horror dawning. It took it, he said. It can't take everything, I said, though my voice sounded desperate. Jonah looked at me, eyes haunted. It can take whatever you don't nail down, he swallowed, and it knows what you need to come back. I looked back toward the trees. The darkness there seemed ordinary now, just a forest at night. But I knew better. We reached the first gas station in the neighboring town. The fluorescent lights buzzed. People moved inside, strangers, with faces that didn't carry Marrow Falls' practiced smiles. I stepped into the bathroom and locked the door. I stared at myself in the mirror. My eyes looked the same. But behind them, something had shifted. Like I'd seen the edges of a picture frame and couldn't unsee them. I rolled up my pant leg and looked at my calf. 4 bruises, shaped like fingertips, cold to the touch. I pressed my palm to them and felt a faint vibration, like a distant engine. A hum, the whispering again, tiny, almost inaudible. Not around me, inside me. I stumbled back, heart racing. The door handle rattled. You okay? Jonah's voice came through the door. I swallowed hard. Yeah, I lied. 'Cause what do you say when you realize the town didn't let you go? Just moved in. We drove farther that night. We didn't stop until dawn. We reached a city where the buildings rose like cliffs, and the streets had names that didn't taste like home. We rented a cheap motel room. The bedspread smelled like bleach. The TV played infomercials at low volume. Jonah fell asleep sitting up, head against the wall. I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and listened. At first, I heard only traffic outside, distant sirens, the normal noise of a world that didn't know Marrow Falls existed. Then, at exactly 2:17 a.m., the air in the room shifted. The TV flickered, the light in the bathroom blinked, and from the corner of the room where the shadows gathered behind a chair, I heard whispering. Soft, patient, like breath through teeth. Stay a while, it murmured. I squeezed my eyes shut and told myself it was exhaustion, trauma, my brain replaying terror. The whispering continued. I opened my eyes. On the motel desk, someone had left a brochure. Welcome to Marrow Falls. The picture on the front showed the wooden sign at the town line, bright in summer sunlight. I stared at it until my vision blurred. The brochure was damp, as if it had been pulled from deep water. I picked it up with trembling fingers. Inside, the pages were blank, except for one line printed in neat black letters. Stay a while. I dropped it as if it burned. Across the room, Jonah stirred in his sleep and murmured something. I couldn't hear the words. I watched his face, pale in the dim light, and wondered what he was dreaming, or what was dreaming through him. I realized then that Marrow Falls wasn't just a place, it was a pattern, a loop, a hunger that learned. And maybe, just maybe, the true horror wasn't that you couldn't leave. It was that leaving was how it spread. So, if you're listening to this, if you're hearing my voice, like a confession whispered into the dark, here's what I need you to understand. If you ever drive down a straight road and see the same sign twice, if a small town smiles too hard and asks you to stay, if people vanish at night and the morning pretends it never happened, don't try to solve it. Don't try to be brave. Turn around while you still can. Because sometimes the last road out isn't a road at all. Sometimes it's a mouth, and once it learns your name, it won't stop tasting it.